Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time you are tuning in. Welcome to Homesteading and Gardening in the Suburbs. I'm Emma from Misfit Gardening, and I want to talk about some things that I wish I knew before becoming a homesteader on a bigger scale. Get some land, become a homesteader, go off grid, right? I was watching some videos on YouTube all about that. And none of them really share some of the things that you might want to know before going all in. And I kind of want to talk about some things that I learned from, going from a smaller suburban plot to a couple of acres, right? Because there was some things that kind of popped up that weren't necessarily expected. And I know a lot of you listening into this podcast, you're dreaming of having a bigger homestead, some more lands, or maybe you're thinking of, going off grid and things like that. So I wanted to kind of talk about some things that we ran into and how we tackled some of those problems. And I'm going to talk about fitness to start with. And I'm starting right here because going from a smaller suburban plot to a couple of acres made me realize that I needed to be a lot more in shape. I've always been a bigger person, and having a homestead made me see how much harder I have to push myself, how much harder the things are that I'm doing on a day-to-day because of the extra, baggage, we'll say, that I'm carrying is, right? The last couple of weeks I've been hiking up and down the field with a wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow of wood chips, mowing an acre with a push mower because the ride-on mower broke, right? Been lifting wood, digging out boulders, carrying water to the bottom of the field, right? Chasing after new puppies, because if you saw on Instagram, we've got 2 new border collie puppies, right? There's a lot of manual labor, and some of this definitely isn't a surprise, to some of you listening, but to others, let me tell you that it is hard work, really hard work. And I actually enjoy the hard work, ironically. It's kind of fun to do. And I started working out and getting healthy and doing some weights and stuff in the house. But it really didn't quite prepare me for the summer. And, trying to get things transplanted took a lot longer because, it was difficult and it was tiring, and, having to break new ground before then planting things in, it took a long time to do. And granted, it still probably would have taken me a long time to do, even if I was, healthy and had a lot of stamina and stuff, but being bigger and having those kind of troubles on top made things take a lot longer. So if you're wanting life as a homesteader on a lot more land, or you're considering an off-grid lifestyle, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I once considered an idea of going off-grid, because having 3 acres has kind of made me realize how much work that is to maintain. And I think if I'd gone off the grid, I would have really hated my choices. But that's what works for me and my family. This is great. But I definitely would recommend to anybody that's wanting to go for kind of this homesteading kind of deal on a bigger scale is to start getting into shape if you're not already. And the more that I've been working outside in the garden and working out, getting out, hoeing weeds, putting in new garden beds, all that stuff, the more I've been doing it, the more I've been able to do. So my stamina is getting a lot better. I'm huffing and puffing less as I'm hiking back up the hill. I can even manage jogging whilst pushing a wheelbarrow, and I am a big girl. So having this kind of lifestyle is helping me get fitter and get healthier. I've managed to lose weight. I've lost about 12 pounds now, which doesn't sound a lot over the number of weeks that it has taken. But on the other hand, going slow and steady is what's going to win that weight loss race. But I wish that I had been getting into shape so much earlier. And I know that getting into shape is very difficult, especially when you're juggling, work and, family life and all of the other things. And I hear it because that's, you know, what I used to deal with, as well as a long commute as well. And now I try to make time to combine things together. So maybe I will do some, you know, kind of circuit training thing, but I'll combine it with things that need to be done in the garden. So maybe as part of the circuit, I'm carrying, you know, a full can, you know, jerry can of water down to the bottom of the garden, and I'm doing some watering. And then maybe the next bit is I'm jogging up the hill, and then I'm refilling the water jerry can that I've got, and maybe I'm doing some squats or something whilst that is filling up. Like, I try to combine things, so I'm not, you know, losing time per se, and I'm still able to get a workout, you know, doing what I'm normally doing. So that's just one of the first things that I realized moving into this kind of lifestyle. The next thing is timing is everything as a homesteader, right? You got to start your seeds at the right time. You got to get plants transplanted at the right time for your climate. Get fall crops started on time, which, by the way, is right now if you're in a northern climate. You know, you want to have a successful fall garden. You want to be harvesting at the peak of freshness and flavor. You want to be getting your harvest preserved, raising animals, making sure that they're cared for. It all takes time and balance. And we didn't do animals this year, and we did that so we didn't overwhelm ourselves, and I'm really glad about that. I think many of us put unnecessary pressure on ourselves to have all of the things, like right now, right this second, right? Otherwise we're not a homesteader, right? I don't know if you've ever felt like that. I felt like that. Like, I didn't feel I was a real homesteader until, like, I had chickens in a garden and all of that kind of stuff. I don't necessarily feel like a homesteader right now, even though I've got 3 acres and, you know, a garden and all of these things, right? And you know, some of that is kind of the comparison, right? You're looking at other people's Instagram posts or whatever, and you know, oh, they've got all this thing, and oh, doesn't that look lovely? And yes, that's what a homesteader should be. But even though we live like a homesteader, sometimes you don't feel like it. And you know, one of the things that is often happening with people who are doing this kind of lifestyle, especially when you're juggling, you know, work and everything else, is, you know, you're not missing out by going slow, right? By going slow and steady, and by, you know, taking your time, you're going to have more success in the long run. By trying to do everything, that can run you into burnout and hating the lifestyle that you chose. Kind of like me running up a hill when I first started doing it. Hated all the life choices that I did right there. But, you know, eventually, as I got used to doing some of these things, I started to enjoy it more. And I like to reflect on the why I'm doing this. Like, why am I choosing to live this life, right? And, you know, I always try to go back to that why. You know, after I've run up the hill and I'm really tired and struggling to, you know, stand upright. But also, you know, I'll be out checking the plants and things have got eaten by some critter, and it's really frustrating, right? I'm pretty sure it's natural to be frustrated when you've lost 50 plants of broccoli and cabbages combined because they've been eaten by something. And then you're thinking, like, why am I doing this? What's the point of this? Right? There's no one forcing me to live like this way, right? I'm not in medieval England, right? Or not an early settler or a pioneer or anything else, right? And it's important to remember that why, so you're not feeling totally defeated. And it's okay to take a break and recharge your batteries or sharpen the saw, was another way that I heard it expressed, right? When you need to. You know, for my husband, that's going fishing. For me, it's crochet, or it's cuddles with the dogs and Netflix, or maybe it's doing a bit of dog training, right? That's something that gives me a lot of joy, is when I am working with my dogs, like Volt, my Irish Wolfhound Collie Cross or Lurcher Rescue. He is amazing when I start working with him on doing tricks, right? We're looking at doing some trick dog stuff together, and spending that time like not doing like homestead stuff kind of takes, gives your mind a chance to reset. And watching him work's actually incredibly fun to do, especially when he really gets into it and he's like really working hard to get the treat. The same with the border collies, right? Having, just watching them play fetch with the ball and running around, or, the puppies just learning their, sits and lie downs and paw, right? Some of the basic kind of obedience stuff, like seeing them learning that and, getting into that is actually quite a good way that I like to recharge my batteries, and it's good for the dogs too, because having unruly dogs is no fun for anybody, even though, I got a border collies. So those of you that have border collies, you know what life is like with border collies. But it is okay to take that break and recharge them when you need to. And it's good to be able to acknowledge, like, this is too much and, I need to dial things back a bit. And having your why, like why you're doing this, is going to help you through when things don't go to plan. But I also recommend, as well as having that why, is having a plan for the year or the next 5 years of goals if you're feeling ambitious, to kind of help, keep you on track with those bigger important goals that you want to achieve as a homesteader. It might be that you want to grow enough cucumbers to make pickles for the year, or maybe you want to pick up and learn a new skill like sewing or woodworking or crochet or knitting or whatever it is, right? Maybe it's fermenting, It might be that you want to make a portable solar powered generator to practice for living off grid. Or maybe you want to put in swales for your garden to move water around more efficiently on your property. So, for example, our plan for the homestead over the next 5 years looks something like this. Put the garden in, begin landrace project. 2, have old commercial chicken barn demolished. 3, fence garden or acreage. 4, build chicken coop, get chickens. 5, build cob pig pen, get pigs. Although, we've got lists of things like remodeling and renovations and repairs for the house that also need to be done on top of that, and those are very scary and expensive. It doesn't all need to be done right now, immediately, right this second. There might be some things that pop up for you that need urgently completing, right? Like a burst pipe, you might want to take care of pretty quickly. Or the chickens have escaped into next door's backyard. That happened when I lived in the suburbs. My chickens flew over into my neighbour's yard and I had to go get them. That was pretty bad. Or the dog busted through the chicken coop. My dog had a seizure one day. Poor little thing. Volt had he has sporadic seizures, and he had one that was pretty violent, and he ended up like going through the chicken coop and breaking things up during his seizure. So that was pretty bad. But we had to then repair the chicken coop as soon as he was through his seizure and was safe. We then needed to get those repairs done pretty quickly. Maybe for you, something that needs taking care of more immediately is deer and groundhogs eating the garden, and you need to fence it, right? Some of the goals that we have for our 5-year plan seem simple enough in that they could be done in a timely manner, right? Like build chicken coop, get chickens. That seems like something that could be done over a weekend. But it's not something that we can do in a year or even 2 years, with all of the other things that are going on around the property and around the house, and work and everything else. And that's okay, right? That kind of leads me on to the next point, which is you don't have to be perfect, right? You don't have to have everything, all spick and span and, looking just right and stuff. And this is coming from someone who is a perfectionist. I'm like the worst at being perfect for things. And I get it. It is really hard to let things go that it's not perfect, right? My grandparents always used to say, you need to be like water off a duck's back, just let it roll off and let it go. And I don't get sucked into what a quote unquote perfect garden or perfect homestead or perfect chicken coop or perfect whatever looks like. You don't have to do it all. For sure, you don't need it to be perfectly manicured and all of those things, right? Make it all super pretty, like it's going to be on a cover of a magazine to be a homesteader, right? I see pictures on Instagram, Facebook groups, YouTube, and all the social media stuff, right? And I'm like, wow, that garden looks amazing and way nicer than mine. Like truth right there. Like I do that all the time. My parents went to some gardens in the UK, and they always take pictures of things and then send them to me. And there was some gardens that they did that were on terraces, and I was like, oh, send me those pictures, because I'm on a hill, right? Terrace gardens are really interesting to me. And I'm sort of looking at these like beautifully manicured flower gardens and stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that looks so pretty. I wish I had that in my garden. And then, you got to realize, like, these kind of stately homes and stuff, they employ people to keep it like that. My grandparents' garden was always really pretty and manicured and stuff, but it didn't always look like that. It took time to get like that. And that's okay. My gardens and stuff right now are mostly weeds. But that's okay. There's things that are producing. It's fine. We get very much caught up in, the picturesque idea of what a homestead might look like, right? And remember, when it comes to a homestead or a garden, right? These things evolve and grow and establish and grow as you evolve and grow and try and experiment new things in your garden, right? I've met so many gardeners, homesteaders and farmers who are like, it ain't pretty, but it works. And, when it comes to things like fencing or trellis or plant supports, garden beds, gates, coops, animal housing, and everything else in between, right? I've seen some, pretty dire looking, animal housing and stuff. And, I remember looking at it and I'm like, I feel like I'm going to need a tetanus shot just looking at it, right? But the animals and stuff in there, they're safe. They're safe from the predators. It works perfectly well, right? They're able to get the animals in and out, get them fed, get them watered. They're safe. They've got the space, right? It works. It just doesn't look how I would expect it to be, right? And that's, that's getting caught up in that picturesque idea again, right? Maybe your picturesque idea of a homestead is a red barn on rolling green hills, or stone walls and sheep with a border collie running around herding everybody. Maybe it's a little brick cottage with a wood-burning stove to cook on, or a wood cabin deep in the wilderness where the grunting of hungry bears wakes you from your slumber, right? Maybe that's what your picturesque idea of a homestead is. But you can get there. And it might take time, and it might take some things, that you're trying where you are right now. And maybe you're going down that, hey, it's ugly, but it's functional things to start with. But then over time, those things become beautiful as you get the time and the money or the resources to make them nicer and how your vision see it. It takes time and it takes resources to do some of those things. And, you're a unique person, and your homestead and garden are just as unique as you. Find the things that you love about it and celebrate those, rather than getting hung up on, oh, well, my homestead and my garden doesn't look like, the neighbours, or it doesn't look like this other homesteader who's in the same zone as me. You do you, my friend. You do you. And speaking of resources, I wish, before I became a homesteader on a larger scale, I wish I knew more things like water in terms of wells, catchment and storage, machine maintenance, and home repairs before we scaled up. Let me just talk very briefly about water catchment. So where I was in Utah, I was not allowed to capture rainwater. and that was part of the city ordinances and stuff. And I know a number of people in dry states also face those kind of problems where you're not allowed to put a water butt onto the house, for example. Where I was in the UK, did water butts all over the place. Like my grandparents had water butts. That is how they watered the garden, was just through the water in the water butts. And that's exactly what I'm wanting to do here in Maine too, is having some water butts, set up so I can, collect water off the house, off my husband's wood shop, off the coop thing, the lean-to, and anything that I can get a water butt or rainwater catchment system set up onto. I want to do that. Now, I wish I knew a bit more about some of those other options that you have. Swales is one way that, water is moved in permaculture. And I wish that I kind of understood a bit better about how to plan putting in a swale and moving water around a property, especially on something like a slope that I have now, because you've got to be kind of careful with how you put in beds and move water and stuff so you don't get a landslide when you're on a hill. So there's things like that I kind of wish that I knew more about, but also just kind of things like home repairs or maintenance of stuff, because some things are pretty expensive when you need to hire in. And I honestly, I wish that when I'd lived in a more suburban area that I had made use of community colleges, evening classes, and other things like that nearby to learn some things that I didn't know I needed to know. And I know that might not make sense. So let me give you some examples, right? Lawnmower repair. So I have no idea how to realign cutting blades, or how to winterize and service a lawnmower, or even a snowblower. I've got no idea. I know how to use a lawnmower. I know how to put gas in it, as long as I'm told what the right type of gas is. Not that I've not put the wrong type of gas in a power tool or anything before. Okay, I have. But I don't know how to use these things. Snowblowers, don't know how to use one. I would just, grab the trusty snow shovel and do it manually, because, hey, it's exercise, right? But I don't know how those things are used. How do well pumps get maintained? Do they get maintained? How often do they get maintained? How does one use a chainsaw? So when my hubby was away for over a month at some training, I had trees come down on the dog pen one night. The dogs weren't in it, by the way. The dogs went out to pee, and the next morning they were not happy that their outdoor toilet facilities had a new shrubbery in it. They were like, what is this? Luckily my neighbour, came over and easily took care of it, but I have no idea how to use a chainsaw, let alone where my hubby keeps the tools that I might need. I couldn't find a saw for love nor money in that wood shop. I had no idea where anything was. And, one of the things that I would recommend to somebody who's looking at going into this kind of homesteader lifestyle, particularly because I didn't grow up as a homesteader. I didn't grow up, on a farm or anything like that. My parents, sure, my parents liked to garden, my grandparents liked to garden, but, nobody had rolling acres of things and, chickens and ducks running around or anything like that I could get involved with. I've learned all this step by step by trial and error, right? And I honestly would recommend see what courses or classes are available near to you, right? If there's evening classes for basic plumbing or car maintenance, those things often seem to be available. Or check in and see if you've got a friend who's got, might need some help with remodeling or fencing or whatever, to help you learn some skills, right? Check out your local library. too, right? Many offer courses and stuff, and they can order in books for you, right? I saw some books on the local university extension office's website that might be helpful for us. Like there was one about raising pigs, and there was another for pastured poultry. I'm definitely going to check in and see if my library has those before dishing out my hard-earned cash to buy it. But definitely see if there's, things nearby that you can help with. The other thing that I wish that I'd done more of is kind of actually talk to people face to face who had various types of animals, so I could see like what really goes on with how these things are raised and what it kind of takes to do that. So, for example, we've been toying with the idea of having a couple of goats. Because, cheese is delicious, but, there's a lot of shrubs and stuff that, a goat would quite happily take back on our property. And, I've talked to people who've owned goats, and, it's really kind of, I guess, polarizing. It's either one end of the spectrum or the other, because I've had some people who've said like they're really easy to take care of and there's little problems and stuff with them, and I've had other people who are like, goats are a nightmare, like I couldn't keep them contained, I couldn't keep them out of the things that they shouldn't be in, like it was just like one was like a Disney story and the other was a horror story. It was pretty bad. But being able to kind of talk to people who've had animals and, get some hands-on experience with doing that, even if it's, mucking out a cow stall or something, right? Just to kind of have an opportunity to ask questions and kind of see what it's really like having to take care of some of these animals. Chickens, I kind of wish I'd been able to sort of talk to some people more about chickens before we got them. And, now, like, I feel I've got a handle on chickens. I think I've had enough, and they are relatively straightforward. But sometimes you get some weird and wonderful things pop up that you're not overly sure on, and it's kind of nice if you're able to talk to somebody that's got a bit of experience about those kind of things. So having a network of people that you can talk to is very, very helpful, but also being able to have an opportunity to ask questions about, maybe it's house repair, maybe it's raising animals, or even gardening, right? I mean, a lot of places here in the US particularly, there are local extensions. You have these kind of expert gardeners, and you're able to ask questions about things, and they're able to help you for free, basically. Master gardener programs, they're usually called. And that's a really great resource for people, especially if you're new to an area and you're not too sure what is going on. So make use of those programs if they're there for you. I also wish that we had done a lot more research, and specifically a lot more research in planning, like the cost of electrical and heating bills, fencing, preemptive repairs, and that we had saved a lot more. So for example, when we first moved in, which was October last year, so 2021, we have needed to have water filtration put in. So the well water tests came back with some questionable results. Maybe that was just because the house hadn't really been used for a while. It was kind of sat for a bit. But even so, like the levels of some heavy metals and stuff were kind of worrisome, and I didn't want to risk that with my family. So we put in a water filtration system, which is expensive. We had emergency plumbers needing to come out. We had the damage from the rat, including 2 ruined dishwashers. Thank you, rat. Things that needed to be done for homeowners insurance were insanely expensive, and honestly, I wish that I had at least doubled our savings, or I had really, really kind of gotten some good quotes for things. which I get's really difficult. Like, it's quite difficult to get people to come out to give you quotes, right? I can't tell you the number of contractors that, we have, called and left messages with and tried to line up for quotes and coming in and taking a look at stuff only for them not to show up. So that was kind of tough, but I really wish that, we'd definitely doubled our savings. I'm constantly watching the cost of heating oil to see when the price is right so I can get our heating tanks filled ready for winter. But at the same time, we're also looking at researching like newer, more efficient heating and cooling systems to upgrade, because I'm pretty sure the amount that we're spending in, electric and heating oil, we could actually upgrade our system to something that's a bit more efficient. But there's expensive like those, even if you are thinking of having like a more off-grid lifestyle too, right? You're probably going to need diesel or petrol or gas, whatever, for generators to power things like water supply pumps and electricity. There's the cost of wood cords that are seasoned. Like, how much wood are you going to need for winter? Do you need 2 cords of wood, or do you need 14, right? What about propane? Where can you go to get that filled up? Is that something that can be delivered to you, right? How much is it to set up a solar system? Does it have to be tied into the grid? Do you need planning permission for that? Can it be standalone? How do you do that, right? I saw a couple online who'd made a solar power setup that was portable, and they designed it for this rental property that they had, like they were renting at the time, but it could also be used for camping, which I thought was really cool. So start small, build on those successes was definitely a key takeaway from that I read. But I mean, we learned so much from like building our chicken coop in the suburbs, for example, right? We had a coop that was in one place. It got stinky pretty quick, and even though like I've got the land to have a coop in a stationary position here, it's not really something that we want to do. Like, I want to have the ability to move that coop, have them deposit manure around the property, and also like eat a lot of bugs and ticks and stuff like that. So I learned things about like what plants the chickens readily ate, those plants that the chickens didn't eat, kind of what chickens were more inclined to forage for. It wasn't snails, it wasn't slugs, unfortunately, unless it was the Brahma, and then they gobbled those up really well. But we learned a lot by doing that from a small scale. And, there's going to be things that we learn going up, to the next scale, right? So, for example, now we're drawing up movable chicken coop designs, and we're working on things that are going to be predator proof, right? So what sort of hardware cloth we're going to need, like how far down and out do we need to do the skirt? So by that, I mean, where the ground touches the coop, or where the coop touches the ground rather, there's going to be like a hardware cloth or something that lies flat against that ground to kind of stop things like foxes and stuff from burrowing down to get under and into that coop. Like, how far out does that need to be? What's the best way to be able to build that so those skirts don't get in the way when we're trying to move the coop, right? We don't want those things to get broken, stuff like that. I'm also working on methods to collect rainwater and use it in the garden, and how that would work. Is it possible to have a water catchment system on the chicken coop, and then you've got water for your birds, or at least a way to supplement water coming out of the well for them, things like that. So research and save for your bigger homestead dreams whilst practicing smaller homesteading skills in the city. Those are definitely going to help you set up for success, right? Canning, when I first started canning, it was only small batches that I did, and then as I got more confident with my skills in canning, we got, we did bigger and bigger batches, to now where I always go back to canning tomatoes for the year, because we knew we needed around 52 quarts, so at least we could have one pasta dish or one dish that had tomato sauce every week. So we figured that out by concentrating on that one thing, and then we're able to start to expand it to other plants and other skills and things. So, I definitely am a big proponent of researching and saving up whilst doing some of those skills, but don't get caught up into that where you're constantly learning, like where you feel, oh, if I just learn more how to do this, then I'll be able to do it. Like don't get caught up in that. Sometimes it's better to actually do it and then build on those skills as you're doing it. And that's certainly what we did. And honestly, I found no end of ideas for how to do something or improvements to something that I already have, thanks to taking a little bit of time over a cup of coffee, looking on the internet, and the generosity of other gardeners and homesteaders sharing their ingenuity with the internet. So that's something that has always been helpful. Like, oh my gosh, I saw there was a different way that somebody had water butts set up. So rather than them being vertical, they had them horizontal, and they had them so they were linking up to each other, kind of like a daisy chain kind of deal. And it worked. Like, my mind was blown. It took up a much smaller footprint, and you were able to store way more water. And I was looking at this and I showed it to my husband, and I'm like, this is genius. And my husband loved it because we figured out, well, this will fit perfectly here, and then it won't be an eyesore. Like, we can make it look nice, so it's not something that the neighbours have to look at particularly or anything like that. So the internet is full of some really great ideas, but don't get caught up in always researching if this is kind of the lifestyle that you're wanting to have. Now, this probably sounds obvious, but when you scale up to have a larger garden or a couple of acres, or from having a third of an acre or smaller in the city, it takes more time to tackle some tasks. So putting up a fence for the dog pen took almost a full day. Because of the size of the dog pen, but it takes more time to do lots of different things. Weeding a long garden bed by hand takes a few days for me to do by myself. I can see for sure why organic produce is expensive, aside from the certification requirements for you to be able to say that you're organic and sell it as such, and the expense that goes into having somebody or a company come out and certify you and audit you and go through all of your paperwork and all that good stuff. That's expensive itself, but you also need to pay the people who are painstakingly weeding and harvesting those beds and fields and stuff. So I can totally understand why organic's really expensive. And having broken new ground, those weeds are just up and covering the ground as quick as I can get them weeded. And attempts to sow fast growing crops to help get established before the weeds were highly favoured, we'll say, by the bugs and animal critters who also inhabit the homestead. So something's ate pretty much all of my lettuce. I've not had a lettuce harvested from the garden yet because something keeps eating them. And now I'm kind of at that point where I've sown some more lettuce and I'm just going to have to keep going and checking on it. And I'm just going to be harvesting baby lettuce, I think, if I can, before something eats it. But, those things come up. My no-till beds, on the other hand, are mostly weed-free. So next year is going to be incredibly exciting to see how a dig bed and a no-dig bed are going to fare up. But also, all of the new beds that I've put in are now going to start moving to a no-till type of garden, which is going to be great because it's going to start reducing the amount of time that I'm spending weeding. I've already learned that having things on a bigger scale takes more time, or at least more people kind of helping, so it you can stick to a similar timeline. But I've also learned just from actively doing things on the property that there's differences from how I used to garden. So I've already learned that I need to start way more plants from seeds and transplant them because of my short growing season. So winter crops, I did a lot of winter sowing. I used milk jugs or water containers. They were a fantastic space saver, and I used that happily for all of the cool weather crops like my broccoli, cabbage, all that good stuff. And I got really good germination from those. I decided not to do start melons, corn and squash indoors to then transplant, but instead I opted to sow those directly in the ground, and I was running out of space pretty bad inside with all the tomatoes and peppers and stuff I had growing. However, I got to sowing my corn, melons and squash really late, so we're just going to see what actually happens. I'm not sure if we're going to get anything to produce in that time, but if it does produce, it produces well, then I'm definitely going to be saving the seed and start building up that land race, right? That was number one on my list of things that we're doing this year, is having that land race getting started. So if it produces well, produces within the scope of the season, I'm going to be saving seed from it. And remember, the first year with a garden or somewhere new is always the hardest, as you learn the cycles of the land. You're learning the flora and the fauna that live there, and you're learning your seasons. When does it rain? When doesn't it rain? How hot does it usually get? Don't beat yourself up if things are not going quite to plan. Each garden you grow will get better as you hone your skills with the land. And I would love to hear from you. What did you wish that you knew before you started homesteading? Let me know in the Facebook group. And until next time, I hope your garden grows beautifully, and I'll see you next week.